Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to today's maths lesson. We are now on week 5, and you're doing really, really well. So today we are going to be looking at multiplying fractions. So we did adding and subtracting fractions, and you'll be glad to know that multiplying fractions is a lot easier. So we're going to start off with our 5 a day. Got a few fraction questions to test your knowledge from last week. So pause the video and you can have a go at working those out. And so here's our answers. So we need to change this one into 27ths because obviously 9 and 27, first common multiple is 27ths. And we end up with 21 27ths, which we can then divide by 3. This one, you see the little dot over the top because it doesn't go in exactly. And so we can stop at 2 decimal places because I'm just going to keep getting a 3. So that's a recurring 3. We put the little dot above it to show that actually that 3 goes on forever. And here again, change that into tenths. And then we end up with an improper fraction, which you learnt last week, which we can then change back to a mixed number. Hope you did well on those. Moody Maths, as always, you can choose to do that now or do it at the end. Oh, that one's got finish your booklet. Obviously, no, today you're only doing Mondays. So let's have a look at multiplying fractions. We're going to start off by looking at multiplying fractions by whole numbers. So we've got a quarter times 3. So have a little think to yourself what that actually means. So if I move myself out the way a little bit, it could be 3 lots of 1/4, couldn't it? It can also be a quarter of 3. So if it was a third of 3, it would be 1. So we would divide that by 3. But actually, at the moment, the easiest way for us to think about this is 1/4 times 3. So I always suggest that you change the 3 into a fraction layout. So you're making them almost look the same. But this is more keep the value, change the appearance. So how can I change that 3 into a fraction layout? So we don't need to worry about making denominators the same or anything like that when we multiply fractions. Completely different, but we want to be able to put them both into fraction format. So what you would do is change the 3 into 3 over 1. So we've changed its appearance, but it's still got a value of 3 whole ones. So then we multiply the top and then we multiply the bottom. So you can see the answer here already is 3 lots of 1/4, which would be 3/4. So that's what we do. We multiply the numerators to get 3, and we multiply the denominators, and we end up with 4. Okay, let's try another one. So have a quick go at these. And have a little think, changing these to a fraction format. These are just unit fractions, so just 1 as a numerator, so it makes it quite straightforward. So pause the video, have a little go at those. And there we go. So we end up with 1 times 5 on the top and 7 times 1 on the bottom as the numerator and the denominator. And here again, we end up with multiplying the numerators, we end up with 4, and multiplying the denominators, we end up with 9. So hopefully you've managed to find those reasonably straightforward. So again, having a look at this one, I've got my 3 lots of 1/8, 1 times 1/8, 2 times 1/8, 3 times 1/8. And I end up with my answer of 3/8. Okay. So that's multiplying whole numbers by fractions. And we can think of it, can't we, as still like a repetition. There's 1 lot of 1/8, there's 2 lots of 1/8. So what about when we're multiplying fractions by fractions? So when we're multiplying proper fractions, so things that are less than 1, the answer actually gets smaller. So let's think about that. So if I want a half of a half, which is the same as a half times a half, because it also means that, well, there's my half, and half of a half will be 1/4. Yes? So half of a half. So when we're multiplying something by a fraction, another fraction, or even a whole number by a fraction, the answer is going to get smaller because we're actually scaling it down. We're saying I only want half of that half. So this could be either way round. It could be an 1/8 times a quarter or a quarter times an 1/8. We'll get the same answer. So as you can see here, I have a shape that I have just covered something up for, and that's one whole one divided into 4. So each section of this is 1/4. So what I want is an 1/8 of just one of those quarters. So what do you think I've divided that last quarter into? Yep, 8 pieces. So there's a quarter, and I've divided that into 8. So each one of those is an 1/8 of my 1/4. So it's exactly the same process. Multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. So your actual answer to that is 1/32. I suppose you could say 1/32th, but it's 1/32. Because if I divided each of those quarters up into 8, I'd end up with 32 pieces, and I just want one of them. But it's 1/8 times 1/4. So for some of you, that visualization will help to understand what's going on. Exactly the same thing. This means 1/5 of 1/3 or 1/5 times 1/3. So you can either take your thirds and divide those up into fifths, which is what we've done here, or you could divide it into 5 first and then do a third of those. But what we end up with is we end up with 15 little squares, and we end up with one of those. So we multiply the numerators and we multiply the denominators. 1/15. Okay. So a couple for you to just have a look at. And again, here we would change the whole numbers into over 1, and here we would just multiply them out. So this would be 5/3, because obviously 5 lots of a third is more than 1. This would be 9/2, because 9 halves is the same as 4 1/2. This one we multiply out and get 1/18, and here we'd end up with 1/12. So it really is as straightforward as that. We just need to make sure that they're both in fraction format, and we multiply the numerators and we multiply the denominators. So your task is page 46. If you want to build your confidence, it's bronze. If you feel confident, it's silver. And if you want an extra challenge, it is gold. The answers have disappeared off of the flip chart, so I will do what I did last week and put them at the beginning of tomorrow's lesson. And actually that's really good because they link together. Okay, time for self-assessment. How do you think you did? And it'll be interesting to see once we get the answers whether you think the same thing. See you tomorrow.